My parents always picked my sister my whole life. Then she learned I had $15 million and threw a full-on meltdown at Thanksgiving dinner. Dad couldn't speak. I never thought a simple TV could shatter a 32-year lie. But the moment my sister Googled its price, my entire world exploded over Thanksgiving turkey, and there was no turning back. For as long as I can remember, I lived in Maya's shadow. It was the air I breathed, the unspoken truth in our suburban Denver home. My father, David, an insurance adjuster, and my mother, Susan, a third-grade teacher, painted a picture of normalcy, but inside, I was always the less-than daughter. While they showered Maya with praise, I was quietly building a $15 million fortune, a secret that became my armor and, eventually, my undoing. Our middle-class house, a modest 4-bedroom colonial with a swing set in the back, held a glaring imbalance. Maya, 2 years my senior, was the golden child from birth. I can still picture her baby albums, overflowing with every first steps, first words, first day of kindergarten. My milestones? They were tucked away in the back of her albums, almost an afterthought. The favoritism, it wasn't grand gestures, it was 1,000 paper cuts. When Maya started dance lessons at 6, my parents were front row at every recital, snapping dozens of photos. Our living room became a shrine to her talent. The summer I won the state science fair at 12, they skipped the ceremony because Maya had a dance competition. My certificate ended up in a drawer. Christmas was the same story. Maya unwrapped expensive, requested gifts. I got practical items or generic presents that screamed no thought. I vividly remember one year, Maya, 14, received a stunning white gold necklace with a sapphire pendant that matched her eyes. I got educational books about scientists. Not that I disliked science, but the message was stark. Maya deserved beautiful things. I should be practical. Even discipline was different. When Maya broke curfew or lied, it was a gentle conversation. When I did the same, I was grounded instantly, chores piled high. Neighbors noticed the double standard. Our bedrooms spoke volumes too. Maya's room was redecorated every few years, ballerinas, pop stars, a chic teen retreat. Mine kept the same pale yellow walls and basic furniture from elementary school until graduation. When I asked to paint my walls dark blue in 8th grade, my mother said, "We don't have money for unnecessary changes." 2 weeks later, Maya got a full bedroom makeover. I quickly learned the only path to parental attention was through academics. Maya was a solid B student, socially magnetic. I pushed for straight A's, joined every club, studied late. Their response? Distracted nods. "That's nice, but don't you want to try something fun like your sister?" This constant dismissal didn't break me. It forged a fierce independence. By 13, I stopped seeking their approval. I cooked my own meals, managed my schedule, found my own rides to competitions. I watched Maya lean on them for everything, even into high school. The one person who truly saw me was my grandmother, Eleanor, my father's mother. Grandma Eleanor was sharp, no-nonsense, a former accountant from an era when few women had careers. During my weekly visits, she'd ask about my interests, listening intently. At 15, while baking cookies, she asked if I knew about compound interest. When I shook my head, she pulled out a pad and showed me how money could grow. That day changed everything. For 3 years, she taught me about investing, saving, wealth building, lessons my parents never shared. "Your sister may get all the attention now," Grandma Eleanor once said, "but you're the one with the mind for success. Remember, true wealth isn't flashy. The richest people in the room are rarely the ones showing it off." My high school graduation should have been triumphant. Valedictorian, full scholarship to Pacific Coast University, accepted into their business program. As I gave my speech, I saw my family. My father was filming, but I later found the video was mostly of Maya reacting, not me speaking. At my party, my parents bragged about Maya's acceptance to Sterling University, an expensive private college, despite her mediocre grades. My accomplishments? A brief aside. It's nice Chloe got that scholarship. She was always so practical. That night, I promised myself, someday I'd build a life so successful it would be impossible to ignore. But I wondered if, by then, I'd even want their recognition. Maya went to Sterling, over $40,000 a year. I went to Pacific Coast on scholarship. The contrast was stark. They furnished Maya's dorm with new everything, drove 6 hours to move her in, staying the weekend. For my move, my father dropped me off with 2 suitcases and secondhand supplies. Well, you've always been independent. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Call if you absolutely need anything. He was back in the car within 20 minutes, rushing home to help my mother prepare a care package for Maya, who was already homesick after 2 weeks. Calls home were similar. They'd rave about Maya's social life. When I mentioned my 4.0 GPA after midterms, my mother said, "That's nice, honey. Did I tell you Maya got invited to join the best sorority on campus?" Financial disparities grew. My parents contributed nothing to my education, reminding me of my scholarship whenever money came up. For Maya, they paid full tuition and a monthly allowance. I worked 3 jobs to cover expenses: coffee shop mornings, library weekends, tutoring economics. Despite my packed schedule, I maintained perfect grades and excelled in business. Sophomore year, Professor Jenkins, my financial analysis professor, asked me to stay after class. "Miss Warren," he said, "I've taught for 25 years. I rarely see this aptitude for financial markets. Have you considered where you want to take this talent?" That conversation was a turning point. Professor Jenkins became the mentor I desperately needed, introducing me to industry contacts, recommending me for internships. The summer after junior year, I landed a position at Sterling Capital, working directly under their chief strategy officer. While Maya backpacked through Europe on our parents' dime, I worked 60-hour weeks, absorbing everything about investment strategies and market analysis. My senior year, Grandma Eleanor passed away unexpectedly. Her death devastated me in ways my parents couldn't comprehend. To them, she was just family. To me, she was my champion, my mentor, the only one who truly believed in my potential. A month after the funeral, her attorney sent a letter. She'd left me $50,000, her entire life savings. My parents were shocked. They'd expected her modest estate to be divided equally. "You should consider sharing that with your sister," my father suggested over dinner. "Maya's thinking about grad school, and that money could really help her." I looked at him incredulously. Did Grandma Eleanor leave this money to Maya? No, but family should support each other, my mother chimed in. "Your sister has expensive dreams, and you always manage just fine on your own." For the first time, I flatly refused. "This is my inheritance, from the one person who supported my goals," I said. "I'm using it exactly as she would have wanted me to." I invested every penny, using Grandma Eleanor's principles. It became the seed money for my fortune. After graduation, I accepted a position at North Point Global in Chicago, in their emerging markets division. My starting salary was modest, but growth potential was huge. I lived in a tiny studio with 3 roommates, spent nothing on luxuries, and invested 50% of every paycheck. I developed a reputation for spotting missed investment opportunities. While colleagues focused on traditional markets, I researched emerging tech and sustainable energy before they became trendy. By 26, I had enough saved to take a calculated risk. I left North Point and started my own firm, CW Strategies. The name was neutral, not broadcasting a young woman was at the helm. I focused on undervalued companies with innovative tech and strong female leadership. My first major breakthrough came investing in a woman-led biotech startup that developed a revolutionary diagnostic tool. When it was acquired the next year, my initial investment multiplied tenfold. By 27, my net worth crossed $1 million, though my family had no clue. I moved to a comfortable, not flashy, apartment in Chicago, limiting contact to holidays and calls. During those interactions, the pattern continued. Maya, bouncing between marketing jobs, making an average salary, was praised for her creativity and connections. My career was barely acknowledged. When it was, my mother would say, "It's nice you found stable work, though it sounds awfully boring." At gatherings, relatives grilled Maya about her life. I got generic inquiries about dating. When I mentioned my company was doing well, conversation quickly shifted back to Maya, excited about a Bali trip partially funded by our parents, despite her being 30. I stopped trying to share. Instead, I created a fictional life for family consumption, a regular finance job, regular hours, regular salary. It was easier than explaining the truth and seeing their eyes glaze over, or worse, suddenly developing interest only because of money. Over the next 5 years, CW's strategies grew from a one-woman operation to a boutique firm with 15 employees and over $200 million under management. My strategy combined careful analysis with calculated risk. I developed an algorithm identifying strong companies with temporarily depressed stock prices due to market overreactions. One success came from heavily investing in renewable energy storage before policy shifts made the sector explode. Another windfall from spotting consumer tech adoption patterns, leading me to 3 obscure companies acquired by tech giants. By 30, my net worth hit $5 million. By 32, it tripled to $15 million, placing me in the top 1% for my age. I owned a stunning apartment in Chicago with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lincoln Park, vacationed in exclusive resorts, and could afford anything. Not that I spent lavishly. Grandma Eleanor's lessons about quiet wealth stuck with me. Yet, to my family, I was just Chloe, who worked in finance. I maintain this fiction carefully. A separate phone for family calls. No social media posts about my business. When visiting my parents, I drove a rented Toyota, not my Tesla. I wore simple clothes, pulled my hair back, minimal makeup, reinforcing the image of someone focused on work, not success. My reasons for this elaborate deception were layered. First, I feared if they knew, they'd immediately ask for money, not for themselves, but for Maya. Throughout adulthood, they'd financially supported her, apartment deposits, credit card debt bailouts. Second, and maybe more importantly, I didn't want to be suddenly valued only for my money after a lifetime of being overlooked. What would it say about our relationship if financial success was what finally earned me the attention and approval I'd been denied? The thought made me sick. Finally, years of emotional neglect made me protective of my achievements. My success was mine alone, built without their support or encouragement. Some deep, wounded part of me didn't want to share it with people who never believed in me. In Chicago, I lived an entirely different life. I sat on tech startup boards, was featured in business publications, attended exclusive industry events. I owned designer clothes and fine jewelry I never wore around family. I dated successful men who understood ambition and drive. My 2 lives never intersected. I became adept at switching between them. Last Christmas was a perfect example. I flew home for 3 days, bringing modestly priced gifts, wearing simple jeans and sweaters. Dinner was all about Maya's promotion to senior marketing manager at a local company, a position likely paying less than my annual business travel budget. "Isn't it wonderful?" my mother gushed, squeezing Maya's hand. "And they gave her a $5,000 bonus." I nodded and smiled, not mentioning I donated 50 times that to a girls' coding initiative the previous week. When my father asked about my work, I gave a deliberately vague answer about projects going well, which prompted him to say, "Well, as long as you're stable, that's what matters." Not everyone needs to climb the corporate ladder. I was so used to this dynamic, it rarely bothered me anymore. Or so I told myself. But that changed when I met Ethan, a successful architect with his own firm. Ethan saw through my carefully constructed walls from our first date. After 3 months, he asked the question no one else had. "Why do you downplay your success around your family?" The question caught me off guard. We were at my apartment. I'd just ended a call with my mother, deflecting her questions with boring responses. "I don't downplay it," I said automatically. "They just aren't interested in finance." Ethan gave me a knowing look. "Chloe, you're one of the most successful people I know. You manage hundreds of millions in assets. You've been profiled in Forbes, yet you just told your mother you had a normal day checking spreadsheets." When I didn't respond, he continued, more gently, "I'm not judging you. I'm just curious why you hide such a huge part of yourself from them." That night, I told Ethan everything, my childhood, the neglect. He listened without interruption. When I finished, he said something that resonated deeply. Living two separate lives must be exhausting. At some point, don't you want to just be your whole self? His questions stayed with me for weeks. As Thanksgiving approached, I made a decision. I wouldn't dramatically announce my wealth, but I would stop actively hiding it. I would bring Ethan home, wear clothes I liked, answer questions honestly if asked. As a small step, I bought my parents a new TV, a nice, but not extravagant model. Their old one was 10 years old. It was a tiny fraction of what I could afford, but more expensive than my usual generic gifts. I felt nervous and excited about this small step towards honesty. The drive from Chicago to Denver the Wednesday before Thanksgiving filled me with familiar anxiety, despite Ethan's reassuring presence. As we pulled onto my parents' street, I immediately noticed Maya's new Audi in the driveway, a car I knew my parents had helped finance despite her supposed career success. Showtime, I muttered to Ethan as we parked on the street and gathered our bags. The TV, wrapped in tasteful silver paper with a blue bow, sat in the back seat. The moment we stepped through the front door, the family dynamic established itself with painful predictability. My mother rushed past me to hug Ethan, thrilled to meet my successful boyfriend, while my father gave me a distracted pat on the shoulder before calling out, "Maya, Chloe is here." Maya swept into the room like she was making a stage entrance. At 34, she still carried herself with the confident air of someone told her whole life she was special. Her dark blonde hair freshly highlighted, makeup flawless. "Chloe," she exclaimed, giving me a quick, barely contact hug. She turned immediately to Ethan, assessing him with obvious approval. "So, you're the famous Ethan. Mom says you're an architect." While Ethan handled introductions with grace, I glanced around. New photos of Maya and her husband, Ryan, dominated the mantle, including several from their Hawaii vacation my parents had contributed to. I spotted exactly one photo of me, a 5-year-old graduation picture tucked on a side table. Dinner that evening was a masterclass in subtle favoritism. My mother had prepared all of Maya's favorite foods, including the labor-intensive Swedish meatballs she loved. When I offered to help, my mother said, "No need, honey." Maya already set the table so beautifully. Conversation revolved entirely around Maya's promotion. She waved her hands dramatically, describing her new office with a window view and her team of 2 junior marketers. "It's just such a validation, you know," she said, sipping wine. "All those years of networking and relationship building are finally paying off. They specifically told me my people skills were why I got the position." My parents nodded enthusiastically. When Ryan mentioned the promotion came with only a modest raise, my father immediately said, "Well, you know, we can help out if you need to upgrade some things for your new position." First impressions matter in business. No one asked about my work until dessert, when my mother turned to me. "And how's your job going?" "Chloe's still doing the spreadsheet thing." Before I could answer, Maya jumped in. "She wouldn't know what to do with the promotion anyway." She laughed. "Remember how she always hated being the center of attention? She's happier behind a desk." Later, I discovered Ethan and I were assigned the small guest room with the lumpy pull-out sofa, while Maya and Ryan got the master guest suite with the queen bed and attached bathroom. When I mentioned it, my mother seemed genuinely confused. "Maya and Ryan are used to a certain standard of living," she explained. "And you know your sister has back problems. Besides, you've always been less fussy about accommodations." That night, as Ethan and I tried to get comfortable on the ancient sofa bed, he whispered, "Are they always like this?" "Actually, they're on better behavior because you're here," I replied, only half joking. The next morning, Thanksgiving Day, I overheard a conversation that confirmed nothing had changed despite my adult success. Coming down the hallway, I heard my name in the kitchen. I paused, just out of sight. "I just don't understand why Chloe hasn't progressed more in her career," my mother was saying. "She was always so good at math and those analytical things." "Some people just don't have ambition," my father replied. "She's always been content with less, not like Maya, always striving for more." I heard Maya sigh dramatically. "I feel bad for her sometimes. And now she's brought this really successful guy home." I Googled him. You know, his architecture firm does huge projects. I give it 6 months before he realizes she's not at his level. I stood frozen, their words cutting deeper than they should have, given how often I'd heard similar sentiments. Ethan found me there, placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, and whispered, "Let's go for a walk." Outside, in the crisp November air, I finally let the tears fall. "It's been like this my whole life," I said. "Nothing I do is ever enough. And now they're pitying me because they think you're too successful for me." Ethan stopped walking, turned to face me. "You know what I think? I think it's time they knew exactly who you're hiding." Later that afternoon, while helping my mother prepare the meal, I took a business call I couldn't avoid. A major investment was finalizing. I stepped into the backyard for privacy, speaking confidently about million-dollar figures and strategy adjustments. I didn't realize Maya had followed until I ended the call and turned to find her standing by the back door, expression suspicious. "Who was that?" she asked. Sounded pretty intense for someone who just does data entry or whatever. "Just work stuff," I said, trying to move past her. She blocked my path. "Since when do data analysts talk about investment portfolios and seven-figure returns? What is your job, actually?" Before I could formulate a response, my mother called us inside. Maya gave me a long, calculating look before turning away. But I knew the conversation wasn't over. My carefully constructed narrative was unraveling, and I felt both terrified and strangely relieved. The final thread snapped when Ethan, making casual conversation with Ryan, mentioned our upcoming trip to Seoul. "Chloe has a new client there," he explained. "But we're extending the trip to explore the city. I've never been, but Chloe goes a few times a year for work." I saw Maya's head snap up from across the room, her eyes narrowing as she processed this new information that contradicted everything I'd told them about my modest career. As we moved toward the dining room for the Thanksgiving meal, I could feel the tension building like a thunderstorm on the horizon. The dining room looked like a scene from a holiday movie, my mother's best tablecloth, the good china, a golden turkey surrounded by classic sides. My father sat at the head, my mother at the foot, couples on either side. My father said a brief grace, thanking God for family and abundance, words that felt strangely prophetic given what was about to unfold. The first 15 minutes were pleasant, comments about the moist turkey, reminiscences. My mother directed most questions to Maya and Ryan, asking about kitchen renovations and starting a family. Maya just turned 34. "Plenty of time still," my mother said, squeezing her hand, "but grandchildren would be such a blessing." No one mentioned I was 32 and might also be considering family planning. Ethan caught my eye across the cranberry sauce, a reassuring smile. As initial hunger was satisfied and plates refilled, my father turned to Ethan with genuine interest. "So, tell us more about this architecture firm of yours. Your website looks impressive. What kind of projects do you typically handle?" While Ethan described a recent museum renovation, I slipped away to retrieve the wrapped TV from the car. Returning, I placed the large package against the wall and rejoined the table. "What's that?" my mother asked, noticing the gift. "Just a little something for you and Dad," I said, trying to sound casual. "An early Christmas present, but I thought you might enjoy it for the holiday football games." When dinner wound down, I brought the package to my parents. They looked surprised. My gifts were usually small, practical, books, kitchen gadgets under $50. My father tore away the wrapping paper, revealing a 55-inch smart television. Not the most expensive, but a significant upgrade. His eyebrows shot up as he read the specifications. "Chloe, this is too much," my mother said, looking confused. "This must have cost a fortune." "It was on sale," I lied instinctively, then caught myself. "Actually, it wasn't. I wanted to get you something nice." "How can you afford something like this?" my father asked, his tone somewhere between concerned and suspicious. "These are over $1,000. "I do all right at work," I said carefully. Maya, who had been examining the box with narrowed eyes, pulled out her phone. The model number was visible. I realized with a sinking feeling what she was doing. $1,500, she announced after a quick search. "Chloe, that's more than a month's rent for some people. Since when can you afford gifts like this on a mid-level analyst salary?" I felt Ethan's hand on my knee under the table, a silent show of support. Taking a deep breath, I decided to wade into the truth, testing the waters. I've actually been doing very well at work, I began. My company has expanded significantly over the past few years, and I'm in a leadership position now. Leadership? Maya snorted. Last Christmas, you told us you were still doing the same job you started with. I simplified things, I admitted. The truth is, I own my own investment firm. We're quite successful. A confused silence fell. My father stared as if I'd spoken a foreign language. My mother looked to Maya, seeking interpretation. What are you talking about? Maya demanded. You've never mentioned owning a company. While this uncomfortable conversation unfolded, Maya's thumbs were busy on her phone. I realized she was Googling me. And unlike previous years, I had made no effort to ask professional publications to use my middle name or avoid photographs in recent profiles. The color drained from Maya's face as she stared at her screen. Then, in a sudden movement that made everyone jump, she slammed her phone down and stood up. Chloe Warren, CEO of CW Strategies, she read from her screen, her voice rising with each word. A boutique investment firm managing over $200 million in assets. Featured in Forbes 30 Under 30 Finance Edition. Named one of Chicago's most influential women in business last year. She looked up, her face contorted with disbelief and growing rage. All these years, you've been what? Secretly rich while we've been struggling to make mortgage payments, and I had to beg Mom and Dad for help with our car loan. I remained calm, though my heart pounded. It's not a secret, exactly. It's just not something I discussed with family. Not something you discussed? Maya was nearly screaming now. You let us think you were some ordinary office worker while you're apparently worth. She glanced back at her phone, eyes widening further. Oh my God. $15 million. The dining room went completely silent. My father sat frozen, fork suspended halfway, completely speechless. My mother made a small choking sound, reaching for her water glass with a trembling hand. $15 million, Maya repeated, her voice now a dangerous whisper. All these years, Mom and Dad have been helping me while you sat on a fortune. How selfish can you possibly be? The unfairness of this accusation finally broke through my composure. Selfish. I responded, my voice level but intense. I've been selfish? Yes, selfish. Maya was in full meltdown, pacing beside the table. Do you know what we could have done with that money? Ryan and I have wanted to buy a house for years. Mom and Dad had to dip into their retirement to help us with basic expenses, and you're just hoarding millions. My parents were still shell-shocked, unable to intervene. How much exactly do you have? Maya demanded. Is it really $15 million? And you've never once offered to help your family? What kind of person does that make you? Ethan started to speak, but I placed my hand on his arm. This was my battle. What kind of person does that make me? I repeated, rising slowly to my feet. Let me tell you exactly what kind of person I am, Maya. I am the kind of person who has been overlooked her entire life by her own family. I am the daughter whose academic achievements were ignored while your dance recitals were treated like Broadway productions. I am the sister who got used clothes while you got designer labels, who got educational books for Christmas while you got jewelry. I turned to my parents, whose expressions had shifted from shock to a dawning, uncomfortable realization. I am the daughter who worked 3 jobs in college while you paid Maya's full tuition and gave her spending money, I continued. I am the child whose graduation speech you barely watched because you were too busy filming Maya's reactions. I am the person who built a multi-million-dollar company from scratch with no support, no encouragement, and not a single word of pride from either of you. Ryan was staring at his plate, clearly mortified. My mother had tears streaming down her face. My father still hadn't spoken, his mouth slightly open as if words were stuck. And now, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion coursing through me, now that you've discovered I have money, suddenly I'm interesting. Suddenly, I'm important enough to acknowledge. What does that say about our family? Maya seemed momentarily stunned, but quickly recovered. This isn't about childhood petty jealousy, Chloe, she snapped. This is about basic family obligation. You owe us. I don't owe anyone anything, I replied. The money I have, I earned through my own hard work and strategic decisions. Just like the attention you received all our lives was something you never had to earn. It was simply given to you. That's completely different. Maya shouted, face flushed with anger. Mom and Dad were just being parents. Of course, they were proud of me. But money? Real money? That's something you share with family. Like you shared your parents' attention and love with me? I asked quietly. My mother finally found her voice. Chloe, we never meant to make you feel less loved, she said weakly. We just thought Maya needed more support. You were always so capable, so independent. I was independent because I had to be, I replied. I was capable because no one else was going to do things for me. My father finally spoke, his voice quiet. $15 million, he whispered. How is that even possible? I made smart investments, I said simply, starting with Grandma Eleanor's $50,000 that you wanted me to give to Maya for grad school. Maya wasn't finished. So, what happens now? She demanded. Are you going to help your family or continue being selfish? Ryan and I could use a down payment for a house. Mom and Dad should be able to retire comfortably. That's what family does for each other. Ethan, who had remained respectfully silent, finally spoke. From what I've observed today, Chloe has been giving to this family her entire life, just not financially. Perhaps it's time someone gave something back to her, like basic respect. Nobody asked you. Maya snapped at him. I think we're done here, I said, placing my napkin on the table. Ethan and I will be staying at a hotel tonight. You're just going to walk out? Maya was incredulous. After dropping this bomb on us? Typical Chloe, always thinking about herself. As I gathered my coat, I turned for one last look. My father still seemed incapable of forming complete sentences. My mother was crying silently. Ryan looked like he wanted to disappear under the table. Maya stood, fists clenched, years of entitlement crashing against the sudden realization that her overlooked sister had surpassed her in the most tangible way society measures success. Thanksgiving dinner was over. The turkey half-eaten, the pumpkin pie untouched. As Ethan and I walked to the door, I heard Maya call after me, "This conversation isn't over, Chloe. You can't just hide your money from your family and pretend that's okay." But I was already stepping into the cool November air, feeling lighter than I had in years. The Marriott hotel room felt like a sanctuary after the explosive dinner. Ethan ordered room service while I sat on the edge of the bed, alternating between bouts of relieved laughter and quiet disbelief. I can't believe that just happened, I said for perhaps the 10th time. Did you see my father's face? I have never, in 32 years, seen him speechless. Ethan sat beside me, handing me a glass of wine. You were magnificent, he said. Completely dignified, while your sister had a full-blown tantrum over money that isn't hers. The aftermath began almost immediately. My phone buzzed with texts and calls, first from Maya, then my mother, even Ryan. I silenced it, placing it face down. They'll have to wait until tomorrow, I said. I'm emotionally exhausted. That night, curled against Ethan's chest, I experienced a strange mix of emotions. Sorrow for the family relationship I'd never truly had. Anger at years of dismissal. But predominantly, an overwhelming sense of release. The secret I'd carried so long was out. And while the revelation had been chaotic, there was freedom in no longer hiding. Morning brought a flood of notifications. Maya had sent 17 texts overnight, a roller coaster of emotions ranging from furious, "How dare you walk out on us?" to apologetic, "I'm sorry I yelled, but you have to understand how shocking this was," to entitled, "We need to talk about how your money can help the family," and back to angry, "Your silence is so immature and selfish." My mother had called 4 times and left tearful voicemails, begging me to come back so we could talk. Ryan had sent a single, awkward text, apologizing for the dinner disaster and claiming he had no part in Maya's expectations. My father had neither called nor texted. I was in the shower when a knock came at the hotel room door. Ethan answered it to find my father standing in the hallway, still wearing yesterday's clothes, his face haggard from what appeared to be a sleepless night. "I need to speak with my daughter," he said. I emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a hotel robe, wet hair dripping. "Dad," I said, surprised. "How did you find us?" "There are only 3 hotels in town," he replied. This was my second stop. "The Hilton sends their regards." The attempted humor fell flat. Ethan excused himself to get coffee, giving us privacy. My father sat heavily in the desk chair while I perched on the edge of the bed. For nearly a full minute, he said nothing, just stared at his hands. $15 million, he finally said, shaking his head. I still can't wrap my head around it. It's not about the money, Dad, I said quietly. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and tired. I know, he replied, surprising me. It's about how we treated you, how we've always treated you. The simple acknowledgement caught me off guard. I'd expected defensiveness, justifications, perhaps even anger that I'd concealed my success. The admission nearly brought tears to my eyes. I wasn't a good father to you, he continued, his voice rough with emotion. I told myself that Maya needed more attention, more support, more everything. She was always so dramatic, so demanding. You were quiet, capable, smart. I thought that meant you needed less from us. But that wasn't fair to you. No, it wasn't, I agreed, unwilling to soften the truth to make him feel better. Your mother and I, we fell into a pattern early on. Maya would cry and throw tantrums if she didn't get what she wanted. You would just adapt, find another way. We took the path of least resistance, and you suffered for it. He ran a hand over his face. When you were 10, you won that science competition at school. Do you remember? You built that solar system model that actually moved. I was so proud, but I never told you. We had to leave early because Maya was bored and making a scene. I remembered. I'd spent weeks on that project, carefully calculating distances and sizes, building a motor. I won first place, but my family had already left when they called my name. There's been 1,000 moments like that, I said. 1,000 times when my achievements were brushed aside while Maya's mediocrity was celebrated. He winced, but didn't argue. You're right. And now you've become more successful than we could have imagined, and we missed it. We missed your whole journey. Would it have mattered if I wasn't successful? I asked. If I was just an ordinary analyst making a decent living, would we be having this conversation, or would Maya still be the center of the family universe? He had no answer for that. Our conversation was interrupted by my ringing phone. My mother calling again. I declined the call, but moments later, my father's phone rang. He answered, speaking in low tones, his expression growing increasingly uncomfortable. They're at the house, he said after hanging up. Your mother and Maya. They want to talk to you. All of us as a family about my money? I guessed. He couldn't meet my eyes, which was answer enough. When Ethan returned, I filled him in. Is it worth going back there? He asked, concerned. You don't owe them another confrontation. I thought about it carefully. Part of me wanted to check out and drive straight back to Chicago, leaving the mess behind. But another part, the part that had spent a lifetime seeking acknowledgement, wanted resolution. I think I need to finish this, I said. Set boundaries once and for all. Back at my parents' house, I found my mother and Maya waiting in the living room. My mother rushed forward to hug me, but I stepped back, maintaining distance. Let's just talk, I said. Maya had clearly been crying, makeup smudged, eyes puffy, but the set of her jaw told me she was far from accepting the situation. I want to apologize for how I reacted yesterday, she began, her voice controlled. It was a shock finding out my sister is secretly wealthy while we've been struggling. I've watched you take family support your entire adult life, I replied. College tuition, help with rent, car payments, vacations. Even now at 34, you expect mom and dad to subsidize your lifestyle. I never asked for or received a dime. That's different, she insisted. They offered that help because they love me. And because I didn't need it, I don't deserve the same love? I asked. My mother interjected, her voice pleading. We love you both the same, Chloe. We just showed it differently. You didn't show it to me at all, I said flatly. My entire childhood is a case study in favoritism. Name one of my achievements that you celebrated as enthusiastically as Maya's dance recital. One time you put my needs before hers. The silence was damning. Maya, growing frustrated, cut to her real concern. Look, what happened in the past is done. We're adults now. The question is, what are you going to do to help your family now that we know you can? The entitlement in her voice was staggering. Nothing, I said. Simply, she repeated, incredulous. You have $15 million and you're doing nothing for your family? What have you ever done for me? I asked. Besides compete for attention, dismiss my accomplishments, and now demand access to my money? That's what families do, Chloe, she nearly shouted. They support each other. Yes, they do, I agreed. But this isn't support you're asking for. It's entitlement to something you didn't earn. If mom and dad needed medical care or were losing their house, that's different. But you want my money because you think you deserve a better lifestyle than you've earned yourself. The conversation deteriorated. Maya became increasingly hostile, alternating between guilt trips, outright demands, and finally threats to cut me out of the family if I didn't share my wealth. My mother wept and pleaded for peace while failing to address the core issues. My father sat in silence, occasionally attempting to moderate, but mostly looking defeated. After an hour of circular arguments that resolved nothing, Ethan and I gathered our belongings. As we headed for the door, my father followed us outside to the car. I'm sorry, he said simply. For everything. For 32 years of getting it wrong. I nodded, unable to formulate a response that encompassed the complexity of my feelings. We drove back to Chicago that afternoon, 3 days earlier than planned. During the long drive, Ethan and I talked through everything. You handled that with incredible grace, he said as we crossed the state line. Most people would have either caved to the pressure or completely burned bridges. I don't know if the bridges aren't burned anyway, I sighed. I can't imagine Thanksgiving will be on the calendar next year. Maybe that's not a bad thing, he suggested gently. Family should lift you up, not tear you down. Sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into. The week after Thanksgiving brought continued fallout. My parents called daily, their approach evolving from defending Maya to slowly acknowledging their role in creating the dynamic. My father especially seemed to be genuinely reflecting. I don't think I ever really saw you, he said during one call. I was so busy managing Maya's needs that I missed who you actually were. I'm proud of you, Chloe. Not because of the money, but because you built something remarkable despite having parents who failed you. My mother struggled more, often falling back on, but we loved you both, or Maya just needed more attention. Still, I sensed a gradual shift, small cracks in her decades-old narrative. Maya took a different approach. After several days of angry messages I didn't respond to, she began reaching out to extended family, sharing a distorted version of events that cast me as a greedy, selfish sister refusing to help family in need. Cousins and aunts I barely spoke to started sending messages expressing disappointment in my materialism. I've never asked you for money before, wrote my cousin Jessica, whom I hadn't seen in 5 years, but my son really wants to go to soccer camp this summer. And since you're obviously loaded. I deleted the messages without responding. The people who actually knew me understood. The ones who only reached out when money was involved confirmed exactly why I'd kept my success private so long. 6 months after the Thanksgiving meltdown, spring brought new growth, both in nature and my personal life. The immediate aftermath had been painful, but the enforced honesty ultimately created space for healing, even if that healing looked different than I'd once hoped. I began seeing Dr. Elizabeth Harrison, a therapist specializing in family trauma, who helped me process the complex emotions. Your success triggered a family system that was built on specific roles, she explained. You were assigned the role of the self-sufficient, overlooked child. Maya was the needy, celebrated child. Your parents were the providers who focused their resources where they perceived the greatest need. When you revealed your success, you shattered those roles, and the entire family system destabilized. Through therapy, I understood that while I couldn't change my past or my family's behavior, I could set clear boundaries. I drafted an email outlining these. I would not discuss my finances. I would not provide funding for Maya's lifestyle. I would only participate in family gatherings where my achievements and personhood were respected equally to my sisters. The response varied dramatically. Maya essentially cut contact, sending a final scathing message accusing me of destroying the family with my selfishness. I blocked her number the same day, a decision that brought immediate relief. My relationship with my parents evolved into something more limited, but also more honest. We spoke every few weeks, carefully avoiding old triggers. My father made genuine efforts to show interest in my life and work, asking thoughtful questions about my company, acknowledging my expertise. "I truly didn't understand what you were building," he told me once. "I just assumed when you said finance, you meant some entry-level position pushing papers." I'm sorry I never asked for details. My mother found the adjustment harder, often falling back on, "But we loved you both," or "Maya just needed more attention." Still, I sensed a gradual shift in her perspective, small cracks in the narrative she'd maintained for decades. "Mom," I said firmly during one such conversation, "my relationship with Maya was broken long before money entered the picture. I'm not using my resources to buy a fake sisterhood." After careful consideration, I did make one financial decision regarding my family. I established an educational trust fund for Maya's children, my niece and nephew, that would cover their college expenses. It was structured so the money could only be used for education, with no possibility of Maya accessing it. When I told my parents, my father expressed genuine gratitude. "That's incredibly generous, Chloe, especially given everything that's happened," he said. "I love those kids," I replied simply. "Their future shouldn't be limited by adult conflicts." My relationship with Ethan deepened throughout this period of upheaval. He had seen me at my most vulnerable and most powerful, witnessing both the wounds of my childhood and the strength that developed in response. 6 months after Thanksgiving, he proposed during a weekend trip to Napa Valley, presenting a vintage emerald ring that couldn't have been more perfect. "Do you think we'll have kids someday?" he asked as we lay in bed that night, my head on his chest, the new ring catching the moonlight. "I think so," I replied, surprised by how much I wanted that future. "But we'll do better than my parents did. We'll love each child for exactly who they are, not who needs us most." In many ways, the most profound healing came through building what Ethan called my chosen family. My close friends, particularly those who'd known about my success all along, provided the unconditional support I never found at home. We celebrated holidays, created new traditions, built connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation or history. Perhaps the most unexpected development was my changing relationship with money itself. For years, my wealth had been a secret source of validation, concrete proof I'd succeeded despite my family's lack of faith. After the confrontation, I began to see it differently, not as a scorecard, but simply as a tool that provided security and options. I increased my philanthropic giving, focusing particularly on organizations supporting young women in finance and technology. I mentored aspiring female entrepreneurs, sharing both knowledge and, in some cases, seed funding for promising ventures. The joy I found in helping others build their dreams far surpassed the hollow satisfaction of accumulating wealth in secret. By the time the next Thanksgiving approached, I had learned several profound lessons. First, honesty, while sometimes painful, is ultimately less exhausting than pretense. Living a double life had consumed enormous emotional energy I could now direct toward more fulfilling pursuits. Second, money doesn't create character flaws, it reveals them. Those who had always valued me continued to do so regardless of my financial status. Those who suddenly showed interest when they learned of my wealth had always been transactional in their approach to relationships. Third, and perhaps most importantly, I learned that my worth was never dependent on my family's recognition. I'd spent decades seeking validation from people who were constitutionally unable to provide it. That recognition had to come from within, from knowing my own value, regardless of external affirmation. The journey wasn't over, of course. Family systems don't transform overnight, and old wounds don't heal completely in a matter of months. But I had found a path forward that honored both my past experiences and my future possibilities. I had stopped allowing myself to be defined by what my family couldn't give me and started embracing what I could create for myself. I would always be the girl who grew up in her sister's shadow, but I also became the woman who stepped into her own light, and that was a story worth $15 million. What would you have done if you were in my shoes?